This is part 2 of a 3 or 4 part long series, where I'm dissecting the entirety of the One Piece world storyline as best as I feel I can, to satisfy the endlessly turning gears in my mind, and sleep better at night. The text will be a direct continuation of part 1, so definitely read that before this if you have not. Link is in the description. This post, part 2, will be covering the nature of the ancient weapons, the prophecy given to Joy Dream Boy, the nature of the will of the D, and the lead up to the First Great War, which came to be known as the Void Century. Enjoy. The ancient weapons, as they have come to be known through the murkiness of history, then, were hardly weapons at all, or at least, 2 of them were not. Every few hundred years, the spirit of the sea and the spirit of the sky would themselves be reincarnated by the remnants of Yggdrasil. Poseidon, the god of the sea, would be inherited by a fishman, and thus, Shirahoshi is the current inheritor. This is why she is so huge. She has the haki of a god, growing to her immense size very quickly after being born, and I believe it is an immensely humorous joke that Luffy has nicknamed her Weak Hoshi, as she is as such literally capable of commanding the Sea Kings to do her bidding. Only Roger, Oden, and Luffy have been known to even be capable of hearing such ancient and powerful beings' speech, via the voice of all things, let alone command them. The very sight of these Sea Kings emerging was enough to make Giscard pass out, and this was when Shirahoshi's power was first discovered. Giscard, as a refresher, was the celestial dragon who ended up stranded at Fishman Island, and his name is derived from both Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor in Norse mythology, as well as Asgard, one of the 9 realms in Norse mythology, and the one inhabited by Earth. Coincidence? Fate? Luck? Uranus, then, is a large point of conjecture and speculation. As with a great many things in the One Piece world, I am going to propose a suggestion that is not new, and has been guessed/proposed before. Momonosuke is Uranus. Why do I feel this? Well, if we go back to Fishman Island, Otohime, the mother of Shirahoshi, did something very like Odin. She tried to change the paradigm by convincing Giscard to sympathize with the fishman, during his return journey to the surface, which she joined him for. Somehow, she did this. Don Quixote Giscard is one of the first celestial dragons to claim himself human. I propose she succeeded in this, in a way similar to Odin's near success at opening Wano's borders. She was simply 1 generation too early for the coming chosen time, and as such, some of that godly spirit was in her, too. He was swayed by her spirit. Why is Momonosuke Uranus? Well, when he first met Luffy, Luffy mistakenly thought they had already met. When Momonosuke reminds him they have not, Luffy dismisses it, saying roughly he must have met someone with the same name before. As Oda is a genius, this is often explained away as being because Luffy had heard his name before from Kinemon, but I believe Oda is far more subtle than that. The reason is because they have met before, hundreds of years ago, during the War of the Void Century. When Zunisha calls out, both Luffy and Momo are capable of hearing his cries, but Luffy tells Momo to command him, saying he should be able to do it. He knows this instinctively, and this will be made more clear in the following section. Roger and Odin could both hear the voice of all things because they, too, were a generation too early. Roger was too early to inherit Joy Boy's will, fully, and Odin, Uranus. What about Pluton, you may ask? I will address that shortly. When I'm found the sunlight tree Eve, he took note of the unfathomable power, and possibilities, that having possession of this resource allowed him. Where Eve stood, around its base was a titanic hole, into which seemed to pour a waterfall, as it is labeled on the wiki, and repeatedly called by characters within the story, of an infinite amount of seawater. As well as this, sunlight never ceased to shine here. Rewatching the anime currently, I noticed that T-Bone referred to an ice lobby as the origin of justice. This was where I'm decided what he would do. He had the Eve tree uprooted, and taken to where the new headquarters of his world government would reign, Mary Geoise, which interestingly, sounds when Roman is, similar to May Rejoice, I think. Here, he gathered the kings of 20 kingdoms, and formed a plan to overthrow the current world superpower, one country. With Eve, the world government has had a massive monopoly on one of the strongest forces available, the devil fruit. This is why the 3 original Logia trio admirals, and the subsequent replacements, have some of the, arguably, strongest devil fruit in the series, as well as the ex-fleet admiral himself, Sengoku, who possesses the human fruit, model Buddha. As rare as Logia DFR, the mythical Zoan DF are even rarer, and I would argue the Buddha fruit is, even amongst those, exceptionally incredible. A long-time amusing question has arisen, and been answered directly by Oda: what would happen if a human ate the human fruit? What was Oda's response? He jokingly suggested that the human eater would, perhaps, gain some enlightenment. The human fruit itself is shaped bizarrely like an Amanita muscaria, a type of psychoactive mushroom used way back in history for shamanic purposes, and was known to Mayans as flesh of the gods. Knowing this, I truly believe, to jump forward a bit, that I'm fucked up big time by giving this fruit to Sengoku, and it has led to a soft enlightenment in him. Kyuzen owes Garp a debt from long ago, to whom he is quite friendly, and both of whom are some of the most sympathetic and grey marines we've seen in the series to date. It is fate that caused this to happen, or perhaps luck. As well as this, Im is the name of a giant in Norse mythology, but when written in katakana, the comprising radicals result in a character which means Buddha. We all love Sengoku's awesome afro, but when Oda drew Enel, the man who considered himself God, Kami, without his bandana on, he has a near identical afro. To top this little rant off with an inspirational quote that I think is unequivocally important for understanding the luck and fate of the One Piece world, eventually you will stop calling them coincidences and realize how powerful you truly are. Im, the first devil to come to this world, decided that he was to be God. He claimed the name Im as such. I do not believe he was born Im, and united the 20 kingdoms into one world government, a government that subsequently declared war on the world. However, within one country there lived a Votan. We learn in Long Ring Land that a Votan is half fishman, half giant. This Votan had a dream, to be the freest man in the world. He set sail, and gathered a diverse crew made of many races and creeds, and formed the first pirate crew. He refused to be bound by any system of rule or governing, and he ate when he was hungry, slept when he was tired, and did whatever the fuck he wanted. He was good friends with the ruling king of one country, a shogun that I have personal suspicions will be named Peach Kojiki. Whether or not his name is Peach, I will call him that for the sake of this theory, and he was the last incarnation of Uranus, able to command the Sky Kings with his immense, godly haki. As such, one country was surrounded with these titanic, and immensely ancient, powerful beings. How was Im to compete against such a powerful, scientifically capable force? He concocted a devious, nefarious plot, of course. He would kidnap both the current inheritor of Poseidon, a princess of the fishmen, as well as the current shogun of one country. If Peach himself was not the inheritor, then I believe that perhaps he had recently had a child, whether it be a son or daughter, and this was Uranus. Now Joy Boy, with his wild, outlandish tendencies and desire to be the freest man in the world, was such an empty-minded, wacky, lovable, and idealistic person, that he often went by another name, Dream Boy. Joy Dream Boy was good friends with the peoples of every race, including the fishmen and minks, and especially with Peach Kojaki. Thus, Poseidon was kidnapped, and the First Great War began. However, before any of this had come to pass, something had happened, roughly 100 years ago, a century before the First Great War. A warning was given. I believe this may have happened a few different ways, but the outcome was the same, whether made by a fishman like Shiarli, or given by the remnants of Yggdrasil itself. Joy Dream Boy was given an unimaginable prophecy of a great war to come. Now the word prophecy is naturally going to incite a massive variety of feelings. A lot of people do not want Luffy to be following a prophecy, or for his future to be preordained, but I think by the conclusion of this post, you will see that not only is it an incredibly, wonderfully fitting part of the story, but that it almost couldn't be any other way. Yggdrasil, with its immense power and ancient wisdom, had the advanced observation future sight of a near god, and could see that although the world had been united again since the terrible cataclysm, another terrible tragedy was going to break it up more than ever before, and leave civilizations, peoples, races, and creeds scattered throughout the world, cast into an 8th century night of pain. This prophecy was given to none other than Joy Boy. Yggdrasil, like Luffy, can see well into people's hearts, and could see that Dream Boy was the most pure and free spirit alive. This prophecy is what has been left at Laugh Tale, along with the recorded history of all that I am describing. To a degree, I do not believe it is word for word, but rather told extremely vaguely, with terms and descriptions that allow for multiple interpretations. This is why Rayleigh tells the Straw Hats, who knows? Maybe you will come to a different conclusion than we did. However, the nature of a massive great war was unmistakable, as was the fact that they would lose. As such, Joy Boy was able to prepare somewhat, and confronting his good friend the shogun of one country, an entire island was placed on the back of a Sky King, Zunsha, and he was commanded to walk the seas until the chosen time came, when the minks, fishmen, giants, dwarves, and every other race could once again unite under one country. As well as this, the fishmen fled below the seas, hiding out directly beneath the capital of the world government, a place that needs be passed through following the Great War that did not acquire the good graces of that world government. Why hide directly where they can be found, you may ask? I believe the reason is twofold. Firstly, they were intentionally hiding in a place where everyone was aware, and thus should the world government eradicate them, they would inadvertently risk uniting the rest of the world against them for committing literal genocide, and for closing off the world completely from paradise to New World travel, which was limited regardless by the strength needed for one to even make the journey. Secondly, Fishman Island was under Newgate's protection, and I believe that since the Void Century, there has always been a pirate crew whose flag and banner was protecting the island. The world government would not risk all-out war with the Yonko, and I believe that as the world government's casual strength has increased, so has that of the pirate crews that resist them. Now, Joy Boy, being a good friend and ally to the people and shogun of one country, enacted a bold plan. He would inscribe the true history on indestructible blocks, and set out to spread them all over the world. These would serve as steadfast memorials to the funny, traveling tale that had been so many centuries in the making. Only those who had the voice of all things would be capable of hearing their message, and only one truly worthy would be capable of even achieving such a power. Other than that, The archaeology island of O'Hara, which had existed for hundreds of years, and made its home in the Tree of Knowledge, would ever learn to read these blocks, but I truly wonder about that. Nico Robin is truly a terrifying person to the world government, and how did she manage to learn how to read these? Could it have something to do with the aspect of Yggdrasil in which the island resided? Once again, we will return to this later. To skip forward, when Frankie constructs the Thousand Sunny out of Atom wood, he tells a story relating to the origins of the treasure tree Atom. Once, long ago, an endless war raged on an island. People died, and the island was destroyed by a rain of bullets and left in ruins. However, the people kept coming back to rebuild the nation near a giant tree, the only one that remained intact, and that was Atom. I believe this tale relates to one country itself. The country, using all the militaristic might of the United 20 Kingdoms, was bombed to smithereens again and again. Every time, however, the United Citizens, with the power of Uranus, used the giant ONI known as continent pullers, and pulled fragmented islands together again and again, and so Wano country has its modern, bizarre appearance. The Great Atom Tree was the only structure to survive the repeated bombings. Its remnants still survived for many years on Elbaf, which are described specifically as a rain of bullets. Why is this? Well, I believe it was because along with the United World Government that had formed, was utilizing another of the ancient weapons we have heard about, Pluton. Now, Pluton is a hard one to pin down, by any stretch, but I believe I have an idea of what it may be, a ship capable of wiping out an entire island in a single shot, and when Frankie sees the blueprints, he exclaims, is this even able to be made by humans? Funnily enough, I believe we may have already been shown Pluton, as this description adequately fits a ship that we have already seen, the only ship, so far, that has been shown to be capable of flight, the Ark Maxim. Appropriately named, as Enel was one of the last surviving Birkans, hiding out on the sky island of Birka, aptly named after the city on the moon, as we are told in Enel's cover story. Uraj, and I suspect King, are both also Birkans. This last vestige of an entire race has been hiding for centuries since the Void Century, harboring secret knowledge and advanced technology, potentially holding it for the time of the coming of the Chosen D. Alas, I am getting ahead of myself. Relevant to the story, I believe that had somehow revived the Ark that originally came to the world, and utilizing its flying capabilities, was able to rain bullets, missiles, and hellfire down upon the helpless one country, along with the rest of the world government's militaristic capabilities. This single advantage meant that they could almost unceasingly pound the resisting nation, although when it needed to land, to rearm, and recharge, the rebelling nation was able to get its forces reassembled, and its nation recreated, in time only to resist and finally fall from the relentless bombarding. This Pluton Ark ran on electricity, and as such, was far beyond anything that mankind has since been capable of developing independently. What conducts electricity better than most anything else? Gold does. Once again, to go back to before this first Great War started, sorry for the jumping around, this is hard to put down into words, as well as Zoe being placed onto the back of Zuncha. Joy Boy was similarly friends with the Shandayans, the ancestors of the original third sect of races that had come from the moon. They, too, were disturbed and distraught at the massive amount of death, war, and terror to come in the following century. Thus, Joy Boy's crew, or with the help of others, collected the vast majority of gold that existed in the world, and used it to build a single, massive city, to be defended for hundreds of years, lest the time come when it need be used to construct another Pluton, in the prophesied Second Great War that would finally put an end to the world tragedy. This was the city of Shandora. The Shandayans swore an oath to spend the rest of their generations defending this great city, as well as the Poneglyph that existed there. An interesting thing to take note of is that the Shandayans were truly distraught when Mont Blanc Noland and his crew chopped down the ancient forest that resided there, even after he had well and truly earned their respect and love. Why was this? Because the Shandayans believed that the souls of their ancestors resided in those trees after they had died. They, like the Skypians and Birkans, had far older and wiser an understanding of the nature of the world they resided in. Pluton was, we suppose, made by the master shipwrights of Water 7. I think it interesting, then, that Tom, Iceberg, and Cutty Flam or Frankie would fight so hard to keep it out of government hands. I believe the shipwrights of that city were tricked into creating this weapon of war, perhaps being told it would be a harbinger of peace, or not used at all, and instead wielded as a deterrent. Either way, the world government was, and still is, insistent that it is fighting for the peace of the world, and in a way, I truly believe that they think that is what they are doing. It is only the very, very top, the admirals, fleet admiral, 5 elders and above, that know of the true history that took place in their creation. These master shipwrights of Water 7, however, deceived the world government, who believed that another Pluton could never be created. Instead, the plans for this monolithic weapon were passed down, generation to generation, until such time as the present story. Tom, I believe, also thought that Gold Roger might have been the true D that the world was waiting for, or as Monkey D. Dragon put it, the answer the world is waiting for. As such, they had a supply of atom wood prepared, in order to best equip the D with a master ship. I am not sure how true Frankie's claim is that the atom wood was bought off the black market, seeing as the Oro Jackson and the Thousand Sunny are the only 2 ships we know of that are made of this rare and incredible resource. Personally, I suspect that Tom used all of their supply on the Oro Jackson, and thus luck, or perhaps coincidence intervened, and Frankie stole the money he used to buy it from the very Mujiwara he would come to sail with. Now, Poseidon had been kidnapped, and over the decades of this first Great War, he used and abused this inheritor's power. In order to further restrict and control the entire world, he used Poseidon to command the Sea Kings to patrol the calm belts, as they would come to be known, and to attack any ship that they see immediately. This meant that peoples could no longer freely travel between the 4 seas, and instead, created what came to be known as the Grand Line. Thus, the Sea Kings came to be known as the enemies of mankind, and in the centuries to come, kingdoms would need to ask permission from the world government to even enter this stretch of sea, as seen in Nolan's flashback. I also think it significant that the kingdom he hails from is named Volkneel, which sounds awfully like live Neil. This is why Loketown exists, along with, presumably, another 3 towns just before the entrance to the Grand Line, to have an absolute monopoly on sea travel worldwide. Loketown and Reverse Mountain parallel Mary Geoase and Fishman Island. Even the Marines themselves would be forced to abdicate to this natural barrier, that is, until Vegapunk would discover a method of lining the Marine ships with sea stone in order to mask their presence from the senses of the Sea Kings. It does not work visually, as ships can still be seen, but rather the sea stone, again, gives off the wavelength of the sea, and thus the Sea Kings are unable to detect their turbulence in the water, and the world government had an even stronger monopoly on the world. Alas, I am getting ahead of myself here. The war raged on. Many people died. The dwarves were eventually forced to flee, in need of resources and a home, and settled on the green bit adjacent to Dressrosa. This green bit itself I find odd, and perhaps was created specifically for the dwarves somehow, but alas, they, like the multitude of non-human races of the world, would come to be abused and enslaved for the betterment of mankind. Joy Boy, despite being told that the war would end in failure, continued to fight on. He even enlisted either the master craftsmen of one country, or his good friends the master shipwrights of Water 7, to construct his own, gigantic ark, which he named Noah, for the purpose of restoring the fishmen to their rightful home on the surface. However, I have suspicious that Joy Boy himself knew that Noah would not be used in his time. The Sea Kings say that it is too early when Roger passes, and that they will attempt to repair Noah themselves, so that it can be used for its coming purpose. However, Joy Boy did promise the fishmen that he would do it, a promise that he could not keep, and inscribed his apology to exist immemorial on the poneglyph that is left there. Again, though, I have suspicions that the apology may be for something else, perhaps for not successfully rescuing the Poseidon inheritor that had been kidnapped. Eventually, when all had been fought, when the centuries-long resistances had been set up, and the world government believed it was on the verge of victory, something happened that no one in the world had been expecting. Joy Dream Boy turned himself into the world government. Although relieved to know his nemesis was in his custody, and forever unable to oppose him again, was unsettled to say the least. Why had this Wotan, who had fought for decades, and, perhaps centuries, as giants live a long time, turned himself in? Sure, they might have been on the verge of defeat, but every fiber of him's being suggested Joy Boy was the type to die fighting, not like a dog putting up no fight at all. However, Joy Boy knew something that I did not. He wouldn't really die, or at the least, his dream would not. For the centuries to come, the will of the deep, as it would come to be known, would be inherited by generation after generation. As such, even as the blades fell towards his neck, while he sat chained upon the execution platform, Joy Dream Boy died with a smile upon his face. Following the death of Joy Boy, the tides of time rolled on. And the world government did everything in their power to forbid and prevent any sort of investigation into the poneglyphs, the ancient weapons, and what came to be known as the Void Century, an entire century of history that was erased, to cover the literal genocides and wars that these peacekeepers had instigated. Should the world ever be made aware of the true history that had caused it to be in its current state, they would be seen not as instigators of peace, but the harbingers of war that they truly are. Over the 8 centuries that followed, I made use of 2 devil fruit, which had allowed him to rule the world for so long. The first was the Up fruit. He had long ago had the perpetual youth surgery performed on him, utilizing his monopoly over the strongest of the fruit, and thus has been able to live for hundreds of years. As well as this, he utilized what Doflamingo called the national treasure of Mary Geoise, and as he said, the combining of these 2 powers would allow one to rule the world, the jewel of the world government, Jewelry Bonnie, or, more specifically, whatever her devil fruit is. Like with the Up no Mi, for I'm to really utilize the fruit, it has to be placed inside a vessel, a person who is enslaved to be commanded and used for whatever purpose he desires, sort of a theme, isn't it? But Bonnie is a very proficient and strong escape artist. She fled the Holy Land, and became a pirate herself, notably earning a place in the worst generation. Marshall D. Teach captures her, intending to trade her for a battleship from the Marines, but Admiral Sakazuki approaches aboard the ship, and the Blackbeard pirates know the deal is off. Sakazuki then tells her that he was truly frightened when she escaped from the world government, but that he was glad she was back under their control. Sakazuki, frightened. It makes sense when she is a container of one of the best kept and most important secrets the world has. Using her fruit, I'm kept some of his closest and most loyal allies at his side over the centuries, by continually de-aging them, and these are known as the Gorosei, the 5 elders. He reserved immortality for only himself. Thus, with the Gorosei being as old as they are, Sakazuki was naturally frightened when Bonnie escaped, as their resulting deaths would have been an unspeakable and unforgivable loss to the world government. Sometime, on the remote future island of Karakuri, Katakuri related somehow, Dr. Tsukimi had managed to create his own automata that exceedingly resembled those of the Moon People. I believe that somewhere on this island, wreckage of one of the crashed arcs had been reverse engineered by him, simply for his own pleasure. He was a contented, peaceful man, and when he suddenly saw an explosion on the moon, he swallowed and choked on his own dumpling and died. One of these automata, I suspect, did not leave for the moon to avenge him. One of these automata was Vegapunk. Vegapunk had inherited his creator's will, in that everything he has done has been for the betterment of mankind, after trying repeatedly to help the inhabitants of his own home island, by using his own cybernetically enhanced labor force of creatures, similar to the ones his own, distant moon creators had. He eventually set out to explore the wide, wonderful, and mysterious world. Due to his own cybernetic nature, he had easily learned all of the reverse engineering techniques his creator had utilized, and had a somewhat instinctive understanding of the technology of his old creator race. Eventually, he ended up in the Germa Kingdom, doing experiments alongside, though I suspect it was largely his own genius that contributed, Sanji's father, Vinsmoke Judge. There, he learned and explored the deeper levels of the lineage factor, and although this work was discovered, and he was taken away by the world government, the Germa Kingdom still benefits from this research, having its own clone. When I'm discovered truly what Vegapunk was capable of, and his knowledge that was 500 years ahead of his time, he chose not to punish him. Instead, he fooled Vegapunk into believing they were the good guys, and as such, Vegapunk has done research for them ever since. Short of the master craftsmen of Wano, who alone retain the masterful manipulation capabilities of both Pyrobloin and Sea Stone, he alone discovered how to manipulate it to fantastic degrees, creating the deep-sea prison of Impel Down, and the lining of marine ships in order to cross the Calm Belt, are singularly his advancements. As well as this, he continued to investigate the lineage factor, as well as how this relates to the devil fruit. We learn from Law that devil fruit work by altering the lineage factor of the one who consumes them, perhaps combining it with that of the entrapped devil soul that I theorized, and thus, the consumption of more than one devil fruit could simply result in a lineage factor so unstable that it explodes, if not for the soul of the devil itself. Javra later suggests the two devils fight, causing an explosion. He thus discovered how to extract the essence of this lineage factor from a devil fruit, and combine it with an object, item, or weapon using Pyrobloin, with the result being, for instance, Funkfried, Spondam's sword that has eaten the elephant fruit. In this way, the mind of the Zoan in question is also imparted into the inanimate object. When a person or animal eat a devil fruit, their very lineage factor is altered and combined with the fruits, and thus they become whatever their fruit was. All of the above concludes my theoretical history of the One Piece world. If you've made it this far, I cannot congratulate you enough, as I truly do not expect anyone to really make it through even the first, let alone the second of these posts, and if you've enjoyed it, I am unimaginably glad. As I have said, I wouldn't be surprised if the vast majority, if not all, of the above is completely incorrect, and some might, at this point, accuse me of writing a one-piece fanfiction under the guise of a legitimate theory video. Although I have strong feelings about this theory, its validity or accuracy aside, writing it has been an intensely enjoyable and cathartic experience for me. Even if it's wrong, it's a hell of a one, and I only hope you can feel the same, regardless of whether you love or hate. That aside, part 3 to come includes my even more theory crafting about the nature of things in the actual, current storyline. Again, although some might accuse this of all being so wildly speculative that no rational person could push it as a theory, I truly am attempting to piece together potential clues, facts, and hints to create what might be a good guess at what is to come. I am simply doing my best not to guess, but to have reasons for predicting what I will predict. Although they are somewhat independent theories or predictions about the outcome and nature of different events, people, and places, you'll see that because of the theory that I have thus far posited, all of these theories and videos will be connected in that way, whether it be valid or not. Part 3 coming soon. Till then, peace.